how do we really build this business? How do we do this at a high level? Create a vision for what this can look like, and then have the framework. Oftentimes we have a vision. For most of my life, I've had a vision, but just no real framework to get there. And so then I just sort of bob along. I go up a little bit, I come back down, and for many years felt like a real struggle with growth. And I'm there again. Like, I'm constantly at a new phase where it's like, okay, what do I need to do to grow to a new level? And that's just the nature of this business. I think, having been in business for 20 years, it's a cycle of constantly hitting a new plateau. And then now we have a new set of challenges. How do we overcome these new set of challenges to continually grow? And what I want to do on this presentation is I want to start out the day and kind of share my ideas around what it takes to really create an empire in real estate, really your dream life, your dream business, and the right order to do that. Because I think oftentimes we can get out of order, especially in real estate with how we do the business. If we get out of order, then what ends up happening is things start to become a real distraction. And I've noticed that in my own life. For example, when I got started, I read the Purple Bible, Rich Dad, Poor Dad. And I went out, and in the first couple of years, I got like 29 rentals or 28 single family rentals. And it was a complete nightmare. And it was the worst thing I ever did. Not that rentals are bad, it was the timing was all off. Just was the wrong timing. And I ended up getting out of every single one of them, and then focused on building a wholesale business and then a flipping business. So I want to talk a lot about creating a business that generates a lot of cash. And this is where, I want to really help you guys have this focus. And this is a conversation I have to have with Chris Allen once a month, because Chris gets these properties that he feels like are good deals to keep. So once a month he calls me up and he's like, Jerry, why don't we start keeping these properties? And again, it's not the idea of keeping it that's bad. It's what? The timing. The timing's not there. It's just not the right time, in my opinion. And so I look at it like this. I look at wholesaling as like freshmen, sophomores fix and flip, juniors rentals, seniors commercial, or could be development, things like that. We can get ourselves into trouble if we get out of order. Now, there's another way to look at this, not so much in order of wholesaling, fix and flip rentals, but you can actually take the one concept of wholesaling and create a mega business out of that, which is what you guys have done. You guys are doing $3 million in revenue with just a wholesaling business. Right? You could do the same thing with a flipping business, scale it to a certain level. So it's not necessarily you have to progress from one to the next up. This tends to be, though, the process. When I look at most operations, they tend to go this route. They tend to build a really good wholesale operation, and then they start to transition into these more advanced strategies like flipping and rentals. And even flipping, you can go all the way up. You guys are doing some high-end flips now. I do that too. I'm trying to progress into bigger margin type deals. But just to kind of give a little bit of an idea of what this looks like. And this has been my progression for 20 years. I progressed kind of through this level, except the rental part I didn't really do. What I did is I shortcut the whole thing by doing Puerto Rico. So that's sort of a Band-Aid solution to come to Puerto Rico. It's not a long-term solution though, and I know that. Because at some point when I go back to the mainland, what am I going right back to? The minute I land back on the mainland, I'm back in the high tax bracket. Okay, so the smart thing for me would be to start planning on that and really start accumulating assets so that when I land back on the mainland, I'm already solving that problem. Starting out though, why wholesaling? Why is wholesaling the perfect place to start? We're really talking about a low barrier to entry. The concept's fairly simple. There's not a lot of risk to get into it. It doesn't take a lot of capital. You can literally start with almost nothing. And if we do it right, you can earn a lot of money. It literally is the dream business that you could ever imagine. In fact, I haven't seen a business model that compares to it, out there. Have you guys seen anything that compares to a wholesale operation? A wholesale business, it's cash now, you're right off to the races, right? Fairly quickly. You look at a typical franchise. You're hundreds of thousands of dollars into the business to maybe in year one break even, year two make 50,000, year three make 100,000. And that's just business in general. And you guys are learning firsthand. It's work. There's no way around it. It's work. But there is a way to build this where we can see revenue right away. If you look at the national average, last I saw was 14,000 per deal. In year one, if you're averaging, let's say you're not there yet. In year one, if you're averaging $10,000 a deal and you're doing 2 deals a month, that's 240,000 gross. And you can do that with bare bones, almost not really much in marketing, no team, all you, one-man show, do about 250,000 a year. But imagine if you bump that to 20,000 as your average and you're doing 8 deals a month. and now you're at a $2 million a year business. Now that obviously has a team and some overhead to it, but you're looking at a $2 million gross revenue business model. So if you're doing, keep it simple, 50%, then that should be bringing home $1 million net, an operation like that. I don't know if you guys have seen these numbers or have a vision of these numbers, but this is very doable. A fairly small team. Now, when you're hitting that number, there's some good news and some bad news. You've created a printing press, but you're also in a high tax bracket because this is transaction. This is all high tax income. Now we're paying a lot of taxes, so we have to figure out a solution around that. Like my number one thing always is, how do I offset tax liability? And I never thought that when I started in business. I never thought that I would be putting so much effort into managing tax liability. I mean, I look at it like the ILI. You know, in the beginning, it's all about the income. Once we figure out how to generate income at a consistent level, then we kind of move into lifestyle. Now it's all about, well, how do I work less? How do I have the things I want? How do I enjoy my time? How do I have the car I want to drive or the house I want to have? All the things, they tend to be like priority number 2. And then once that becomes normalized, then we move into impact. How do I have a legacy? How do I make a difference in the world? How do I impact people for good? And we want to move through these phases so that we're really doing something valuable to the world. We're really making a difference. And so this is where I wanted to get to with you guys, is I wanted to talk about what I've noticed as I've built my own businesses. Is I look at building out your printing press, your wholesale business, if that's the printing press, which I think there's no better printing press than a wholesale operation. It's phase 1 is proof of concept. That phase is critical because it proves to yourself that you can do this. And then there's phase 2, which is the lone wolf. And this is where pretty much I met you guys. You were in this phase. Like you're running around, you're a solo operator. It's long days, hard days. You're wearing all the hats. You're the CEO and the janitor, right? You're going on appointment, you're closing it, you're running home writing the contract, you're finding the cash buyer, you're doing all the things. And what I found is this phase 2, the lone wolf phase, this is probably 80% of wholesalers in the marketplace, maybe even higher. Again, this is the 2-3 deals a month. Maybe you're up to like 4 or 5, but a lone wolf cannot do more than a couple transactions a month because they got to wear all the hats. And it really is a high paying job. I mean, this is the self-employment box. And this is not just 80% of wholesalers, this is 80% of business owners. Most small business owners are self-employed. It's the plumber on the job site. It's the doctor that does all the thing. You are a one-person show. Yeah, this is the idea that why work 9 hours for someone else when you can work 12 hours for yourself? Yeah. That's this phase. That's the lone wolf phase. Now you see it through. Like, why do you see it through? Like, what's driving you in phase 2? Why are you doing it? Why not just go get a job? Life would be a lot easier. When I was in the lone wolf phase and I was making a couple $100,000 a year, that was way more than any money I'd ever seen. This is amazing, but it wore off real fast. Why? I was exhausted. I wasn't seeing my family. The whole reason why I got into business was so that I could go to the piano recital, and I couldn't go to the piano recital. I was just working like a dog at both ends. The money wore out real quickly because I realized I can't keep doing this. It's not good for my health. It's not good for my family. It's not sustainable. You have this moment where you're like, this is not sustainable. Now what do I do? Who's felt this? Who's felt like I'm in this phase right now? Like, I can't keep doing this. This isn't working. The problem is phase 3 is worse than phase 2 because phase 3 is where you start to scale. But what's the problem when you start to scale? You bring on overhead. And when you bring on overhead, you're making less money now than you were making in phase 2. So typically in phase 3, your revenue goes up because now you have an acquisitions person or you're starting to create a little bit of a team and revenue starts to go up, but now you picked up overhead. So in most cases, you actually make less money in phase 3 than you did in phase 2. And this is why most people never move on, because what happens? They go to phase 3, they try it, they start to scale, they start to hire, and then what do they quickly realize? You have this aha moment where you're like, I'm making less money than when I did it all myself. And so what do? You go back down. You go back down to the lone wolf phase because at least I was making 250 grand running around ragged, whereas at phase 3, I'm not making any money. And I got all these headaches. My headaches have just 10x'd because now I got to fire somebody. I hired the wrong person. They're stealing from me, like all the things that happen in phase 3. But by the way, where I got that phrase was when I bought this hotel. So it's 20 rooms. And it's got the restaurant and it's got stuff up here that will monetize. But I called up a buddy who's a hotel guy, like he owns a bunch of hotels. And I'm telling him about it. And he's like, how many rooms are you? I'm like, 20. He's like, okay. This is what he said to me. He said, under 100 in the hotel business is where money goes to die. I go, oh. But why? Why is that the case? It's economies of scale. It takes just as much overhead to run a 100-room hotel as a 20-room hotel. You got to invest in software, and you got to invest in cleaning people and a maintenance person and a manager and staff, right? Same team to do a 20 as a 100. But what's the problem really in phase 3? Is it that you shouldn't scale and you should go back? What's really happening here? Because you can only attract talent equal to your vision, to your level of leadership. This is John Maxwell law of the lid. You will only ever attract people equal to your level of leadership. So then you're able to get a sales guy, but they're like a B, C level sales guy, not an A level sales guy, because the A sales guy is going to go where? To an A leader. Like an A leader is only going to get A talent. So the only way out of phase 3 is what? Develop yourself to a better leader. You have to go through it. You just have to go through that phase. So the problem here is this. Chris has built a team, but the team he's got cannot support the revenue he's generating. So what's happening right now is he's got a team, but the team is only operating at a level that is unsustainable. Now, the same size team and the same overhead could be producing $2 million a year with no more people, no more overhead, but what? Better execution, better leadership, better talent. It's not like he needs 3 more acquisitions people. No, you can do it with the 1 or 2. This is Matt. This is probably Jordan. It's not just about opening an office and hiring bodies. How do we lead this organization to where we're hitting more efficiency? We want to think it's about the people, the marketing channels, the market, like I'm in a hard market, or man, if only I had a good acquisitions guy, or man, only if I had good leads. And certainly there's a place for that. Like those things do matter. Like there's some legitimacy to that. But really what it's really about is what? The leadership of the organization. Your sales team is always going to say that it's the leads. Like if you have a sales guy not producing, every single time they're going to say it's the leads. But then you take those same leads and you give it to an A player and he's closing them, right? Every time it's proven. In fact, usually you have in a sales organization, you have your A, B, Cs. The A's are closing the same leads that the C's aren't closing. It's usually not those things. And if it is, it's a percentage of the issue, not the whole issue. And we tend to think it's the whole issue. So that's why this is called where money goes to die, because what ends up happening is you end up going back a step. At least it feels that way initially. It feels like we're going backwards, not forwards. And what I want to propose to you is just keep the vision of where you're at in the process. Here's the problem. You cannot go from phase 2 to phase 4. Let's set phase 3 aside for a second. Let's just set that aside. Let's talk about phase 4. What is phase 4? I call phase 4 like the 1% club because you've actually survived through phase 3. And these are the $1 million a year producers. I'm talking take home, $1 million a year take home producers. And they're hitting an annual revenue where their taxable income or their take home pay is $1 million. And I'm talking in a wholesale operation. What did phase 4 do to get there? Like, how did they get to that phase 4? And by the way, the team, the overhead, the structure is no different or not much different than phase 3. That's the crazy thing. Same number of salespeople, same spend on marketing, same market. It's not like they went to a magical market or anything like that. What's different about phase 4? What are they doing different? They've got the same number of people. They're just A-level people. They're operating at a high level. The organization now is functioning on full cylinders. There's great communication. There's great training. There's great efficiency. Now the machine's just turning well, very well-oiled machine. Same overhead as phase 3. Isn't that crazy? You figured out how to dial it in. And more than anything, you just stuck it out through phase 3 and you developed as a leader. You developed the process. And I wish Mark was here. When I talk to Mark, he tells me, he's like, Jerry, I am 100% into the Joe model. I'm 100% in. I want to learn the process and I want to operate well. I want to learn how to run a business. I don't just want to transact. This is what he's telling me. I don't want to just transact. I want to build a legit business. Jordan, you told me the same thing. Like, how do I learn how to operate at a high level? How do I learn how to be a good leader? How do I learn how to hire the right people, train the right people? And it's a mindset that gets you to phase 4. It's not like, oh, I found this amazing sales guy. It's not that. It's the mindset, and the mindset will attract the right talent because you're building something now with the end in mind. It's not just about how do we go get a good deal this month. It's about how do we build a company that can attract and sustain good deals again and again and again. In your operation, your wholesale operation, you are the prime example because you've completely replaced yourself from the business. It's a high profit, high margin where you as the owners have been able to take a step out of the business. And now that's freed you up to then develop other things. Again, the the entire objective of all of this is to replace yourself, to buy back your time and replace yourself is the ultimate goal. Jordan was asking me last night, he's like, Jerry, how are you doing software? How are you doing coaching business? How are you doing building luxuries in the hotel? How are you doing all these things? The only way is to replace myself in a lot of the functions of those businesses. There's no other way. So here's what happened with me. When I was in the lone wolf phase, I had this mindset that nobody could do it better than me. And it was actually true. I mean, Matt, no one's going to close better than you on an appointment. You're never going to find someone that's going to close better than you. Or at least I have a feeling you think that, right? I thought that. No one's going to close better than me. No one's going to do this. No one cares more than me. It's my business. Why would anybody even care more than me? And then when I went into phase 3, I switched the mindset to, well, if somebody else can do it 80% as good as me, that's good enough because at least now I'm not doing it. Still the wrong mindset. And it was true. I was hiring people. They were okay, but they weren't great. But at least they're doing it. When I got to phase 4, the mindset was, I can find people in these roles that can do it way better than me. And that was a really transformational moment for me, was to think people will work for me that are better than me. Maybe not at the whole thing, but at whatever they're doing. And then that was game changer. And I'll give an example. When I bought the hotel, I was the bottleneck. I was the guy. I was managing it. And this was a massive renovation. This thing was vacant and completely run down. It had a fire and it was not going well because I wasn't able to give it the right attention. So then I brought in an operator and the whole thing got turned around. And today this thing is run very, very well. Now we have problems like any hotel would, but like we're on it and it's functioning very, very well. And I'm completely hands off. I don't even know the problems. I don't deal with any of it. I'm 100% hands off. Now, once I identified my operator and they proved out to me that they were amazing, like they were 100% in on this thing, I went back to them and I said, look, I'm probably going to be in this hotel for at least 4 or 5 years before I can even sell it if I wanted to, because I have to get the tax credits out and it takes some time. And if I sell early, I would lose the tax credits. But I need you to have 100% buy-in. What would that look like? And then I offered some equity in the hotel. Not much. Do you know what that 5% of equity did to the operator on this hotel? I mean, they were already like all in. Now they're like, they feel a sense of ownership. They feel a sense of ownership. She feels like it's hers. She's laying awake at night worrying about it. She's thinking about how do we make more money? How do we do these new ideas? How do we increase our customer service? How do we get better review? Like all of it. And what am I not doing? I'm not doing that. You know, I look at Dan Martell, who owns like 200 businesses. You know what's fascinating? Like you look at Tony Robbins. So here's Tony Robbins' structure. I did not know this, but Tony Robbins has hundreds of businesses he owns. He has, I think it's like 7 or 9 CEOs, and each CEO oversees like 20 businesses. This is literally his structure. So there's one person at the top. They oversee like 20 businesses and then another one. So imagine like this flow chart. And this is like Richard Branson. Richard Branson, I think there's like 400 companies under the Virgin brand. At the high level, that's how they're all operating. How are they running hundreds of businesses and billionaires? What can we learn from that? Well, learning how to get the right people in their organizations. Right now, though, we all have to own it. Like you're at a certain phase right now. The number one thing you can do is develop yourself as a leader so you can attract better talent. That's the biggest thing you could do right now to move the needle, is how do you develop out these systems and processes so that you can bring on people that will then own those processes and do them for you so that you can now move out of those roles. And I want you guys to know, like, that's my belief in you guys. Like, I'm partnering with you guys because I believe you guys can become those high operators. And I wanted to bring Joe in because I see what they're doing. I see the businesses they're building, and I believe that they can bring those processes to the table and help us do that. And I believe that about you guys. I believe you guys are invested in the model, but they're only as good as we use them, just like any processor in any system. What does this need to look like? How do we show up and how do we create this and build this? Because I believe you guys can all get to this phase 4, and you can do 2 things when you get to phase 4. You can go to phase 5 with the same business and become a mega wholesaler. And there are some. There are not a lot of them, but there are $1 million a month producers in our industry. It's insane. Like I never imagined that our industry would have $1 million a month producers. Now there's a couple things they do. They're not much different than phase 4. Here's what they're doing. They're in 4 to 6 markets, not one. Their marketing channel really, really, really well, which is PPC. because you can scale PPC infinitely. And then the other thing that they're doing is they're not distracted by multiple exits. They basically buy really, really deep, and their average assignment fees are 40 to 50,000. So they're in a market that can sustain that. They're basically doing one thing, and they're training their teams to do one thing. You go in super, super deep, you anchor super, super low, and you get the big wins. And that's all you're looking for is the high motivation. You're not squeaking out 5 out of a deal. So here's the other model. And I know of one operator that's really well. They're not quite $1 million a month, but they're about 500,000, I think is what they average monthly in one market. So here's what they're doing different. Multiple marketing channels. They're doing PPC, direct mail, cold calling. They do all of them. Why? Well, they're in one market, so they got to hit all the angles. They do radio, they do TV, they do all of it. And then what else do? They do multiple exits. So they are flipping, they are doing creative, they are doing all the things. So the way to do it in one market would be you do expand into those multiple channels and multiple exits. Now, that's what I'm proposing to you guys. So we got to figure out how to find the winning channels and the winning exits. But you can do a single market and do the 500 to $1 million a month in a single market. There's capacity for it. The mega wholesalers are doing virtual 4 to 6 markets, one call closes with high intent sellers. Or there's the other model that we're following, which is more like go on appointment, but we're going to have to hit all the angles. Lots of different marketing channels to get in front of lots of different people. And then we better be able to close deals or exit deals multiple ways. If we could introduce one flip out of every 5 or 10 deals, one a month, but we're very, very careful about what those deals look like. Those could double our revenue. But we got to be very careful about it, because if you're not careful about fix and flip, you can fall into the same mistake that we do with wholesaling. We're a high volume, high transaction, low margin model. Very easily, we're doing fix and flips to make 20 grand, just like we can do wholesaling to make 10 grand. Like a wholesaling operation that makes 10 grand average is a losing business. You're out of business. You cannot sustain it. And this is Phoenix. Phoenix is an entire market of flippers that will spend 60 on a rehab to make 20 on a net. It's insane that you would do that level of a flip to make that small of a margin. Now, we're going to wholesale the snot out of our deals of those guys. So that's our buyer, because they're okay to make low margin. And those guys will never grow out of a mom and pop operation. They will only ever take home 150 grand a year doing 15 flips. The people that we are going to wholesale to are the lone wolves and the level 3 flippers and buy and hold guys. That's our market. Those are our buyers. They're single operators. They're a husband-wife show. They do 15 flips a year. They're okay to make 15, 20 grand on a flip and try to do 10 of those a year. And they overpay. Unless they change, they'll never grow out of that model. And I was there. I was doing about 80 fix and flips a year. So I'd have 10 to 15 going on at a time. Yeah, it was nuts. It was crazy. And I just bounced around from fire to fire. I was making about 25 grand a pop, or at least that's what I was telling myself I was making. That was on paper. So I was flipping at about $125,000 to $150,000 houses, entry-level houses. Cookie cutter, little 1,000 square foot, brick ranches and stuff. And then I did this $375,000 house. I used all the same contractors, same Home Depot, but I made $75,000 on the deal, and it was no different. So I was like, okay, $25,000 doing these or $75,000 doing this one. Process, time, everything the same. More money because it was a higher dollar neighborhood. That was the only difference. And I realized, same time, energy, and effort, 3 times the profit. What am I doing? And that was my first moment of margin over volume mindset. And so I completely transformed. I got out of all those entry-level neighborhoods I was flipping in. I started marketing and looking for 400 to 600,000 price point neighborhoods. And the following year, I did 10 or 12 flips, fix and flips, and made more money than the previous year doing 80. But why? I focused on high margin deals that were more like in the 75 to 100,000 profit instead of the $25,000, $30,000 profit. And I continued that model. Does this work at $1 million? Does this work at $3 million? And so here's my story. It took me years, like probably 10 years of flipping. And my playground for a while was St. George, Utah. I would build a house and I would price it at around $750,000 to $1 million. That was my price point. And at that time, St. George supported that price point really well. But that was sort of like the top. There wasn't really more than $1 million sales happening in St. George at the time. And I would have a home in the parade every year, and we had a model and we were doing this. And I'd make a couple $100,000 per deal. It was awesome. Well, what's next? What's the next level? How do I go from $1 million to $3 million? How do I jump to that price point? St. George couldn't support it. There wasn't really a buyer at 3 million at the time, but Scottsdale, Arizona did. Scottsdale, Arizona had a market for $3 million homes. So I go to Scottsdale, Arizona. My first $3 million deal, I lose $200,000. My second $3 million home, I broke even. Now I'm 5 years in on luxury, okay, getting my butt handed to me. But what am I doing? I'm learning. Oh my gosh, I'm learning. What did I do wrong? What did I do wrong? How do I do this better? My third one, I made 1.2 million net. And then it was amazing. When I did that one, it was sort of like the proof of concept idea. It was like something happened mentally. I like reset my thermostat and I did like 4 more $1 million deals in like the next 12 months. It was sort of like, okay, this is now my new normal. Now I don't even think about doing a luxury unless I'm going to make $1 million. And so now the one I'm going to show you guys tomorrow, I'm trying to make $3 million on one single deal. Like I'm trying to now graduate. Well, what's the next level look like? And I think I can build a model where I can do 1 or 2 of those a year. What am I thinking about doing right now? Like yesterday I was out there with my guys and we're like redesigning the kitchen and I'm standing there. You guys are going to go. I'm standing there on rebar in the hot sun and I'm trying to figure out how I create better budgets and processes, and because it's a whole new model here than in the States. But my objective is to get a process, get a team. And when I'm back in the States, what am I doing here in Puerto Rico? Making $3 million a deal every single year for as long as I want to keep doing that model. But I got to get a team. I got to get the capital. I got to build the process. I got to dial it in. But that's the way I'm thinking. I'm not just thinking about how do I make money on a deal and then go chase another deal. What I want you guys to learn how to do and what I'm proposing here is don't chase deals. Build a business that just happens to do deals. Jerry, that sounds great. Right now I'm where money goes to die. How do I get out of that? What does it look like? And what are the process? What am I missing? What am I getting in my own way? How am I the bottleneck? So usually phase 3 is you're the bottleneck. You're the problem, not the anything else. It's you. And that takes a lot of self-confrontation. It takes a lot of like looking in the mirror to say, okay, well, how am I causing all the problems in this business? I never look at a deal as the deal. I look at it like, if I can't build a process to do this, I'm not even going to do it one time. Even if I could do it one time and make money, I don't want to do it. Because all that's going to do is suck me into a project that I'll do one time and be done. I'm willing to put some effort into it, but if the objective isn't to create a model, have a system, have a process, and have people to run it so I can do it again and again, I don't even want to do it one time. Okay, and I hope you guys are thinking that way too. If I'm going on appointment and there's a way to close really effectively, the goal isn't that I'm the one that goes on appointments from now on. It's what? I'm going to go on appointment for one reason, to learn how to train someone else to go on appointment for me. That's why I'm going on appointment. So I can figure this out and get it dialed in so someone else can do it and hopefully do it better than me, because that's the goal, is to get someone doing it better than you. When you get that mindset around this, everything will start to change. You'll wake up every day, you'll approach your challenges, you'll approach the obstacles you're facing, you'll approach how you hire, how you do all of it from a completely different perspective, because now you're building a business that does the things, not how do I run around today and do the things. See the difference? Not many people figure it out. Like I honestly think phase 4 is maybe 5% of business owners are truly at that level. Most are that subcontractor, either lone wolf or the phase 3 operators. They're not real business owners. They're just self-employed. That's 80 to 90% of all small business owners are in that level. They never graduate to become a real business. I don't want you guys to get stuck in phases 2 and 3. You guys don't want to get stuck ever in phases 2 and 3. That's not the goal here. Here's what I tell Chris. Jordan, you and I talked about this the other day. Once your printing press, wholesale operation is operating on full cylinders and you literally could step outside of it, now you're still going to be at a high level. Like these guys are spending, combined 12 hours a week because they still got to keep their eye on the ball, right? And they're making sure though that everything's running on all cylinders. But when you're at that phase, now you've got bandwidth, you've got excess cash, you're in a place where you can build out your commercial goals you have. Right, but what would happen right now, Jordan, if you started diverting a whole bunch of your attention to commercial? The golden goose would be in jeopardy. That's laying the golden eggs. So the mothership has to be protected at all times. Priority number 1 is protect the mothership. And then when that's sustainable, now you can start to do big things. That's the mindset or the concept that I wanted to share here with everybody.